Okay, we are joined by the CEO of the Metro Transit Authority, Mr. Paul Ballard. Paul, if you would, please introduce who you have brought with you, and then make any comments you have on the mayor's budget and any other comments you might have in general.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my right is Jeff Yarborough, who is the Vice Chair of the MTA Board and also Chair of the Finance and Audit Committee. To my left is Ed Oliphant, our Chief Financial Officer, and also with us today is Freddie O'Connell, the Board Chair, back here, along with Marion Ott, our Board Member, and Eric Beyer, who is our Council Liaison, all back in this part of the room. Mr. Chair, members of the Budget and Finance Committee, and other members of Council, thank you for the opportunity to discuss with you the progress of the past year and the ability to share with you some of the progress we envision for the year ahead. It's been a hectic year, yet a very productive year. For the first time in several decades, we are on track to exceed 10 million annual passenger trips when the current fiscal year comes to a close on June 30th. Our regular route ridership is up 15% when compared to the same year-to-date period as last year. Our Access Ride program, which provides transportation services to people with disabilities, has also experienced significant growth, and we expect to close out the current fiscal year with a total of almost 370,000 trips, the highest annual ridership in the history of the service. This continues our successful record of operating the largest transportation service of its kind for people with disabilities in the state of Tennessee. The services we manage under contract for the Regional Transportation Authority of Middle Tennessee are experiencing even greater ridership increases. The Music City Star Regional Rail Service is up by 20%, and the regional bus services to the surrounding counties are up by 61%. These numbers are expected to grow even further as we inaugurate new regional bus service to Clarksville and Montgomery County on June 1st. A little background on MTA. MTA operates a fleet of 146 full-size buses and 67 Access Ride paratransit vehicles. Our funding is approximately 50% from Metro, 25% from the federal and state combined, and 25% from self-generated sources, principally bus fares. We base our buses at two locations. The first is the former Peterbilt plant in Madison, and the second is our longtime bus garage on Nestor Street. After our bus garage on Nestor Street was damaged in the flood of 2 years ago, we bought the Madison Peterbilt plant in partnership with Metro government. Our administrative headquarters will move to that site on June 4th, and our heavy maintenance, paint, and body shop will locate there this fall when renovations to the existing buildings are complete. We are sharing the 65-acre property with the police department's new Madison precinct and the under-construction DNA crime lab. We look forward to welcoming all of you to an open house later on this fall. Our Nestor garage will continue to be utilized as a rapid deployment facility for in-service buses with fueling, washing, and minor repairs only. This facility is close to downtown and allows us to maximize our efficiency by shortening the distance the bus must travel to and from the garage to Music City Central Station. In the current fiscal year, we expanded services along the Broadway West End corridor as a result of a $3.6 million federal grant that we won. This grant also allowed us to introduce expanded services to Bellevue with additional trips during the day, as well as the first night and weekend service to Bellevue in at least 10 years. We also added 2 new routes serving Madison and Old Hickory to and from downtown, originating at the Park and Ride lot at our new administrative headquarters in Madison. One of the bus routes provides express trips, and the other will restore service to Old Hickory, Lakewood, the Hermitage, and Summit Medical Center, which has been missing for several years. Through our partnership with Metro Nashville Public Schools, we improved services to Pearl Cone Magnet High School and Bailey Stem Magnet Middle School earlier this year. And this fall, we will be providing the first ever MTA bus service to Whites Creek High School and restoring service to Hunters Lane High School through an additional federal grant that we won. This grant will allow us to expand the number of buses on our Dickerson bus route to deal with crowding issues there. All of the services we've implemented over the past several years have stemmed from our adopted master plan, which calls for investment in several areas of our city. This fiscal year 2013 work plan is no exception. Should our budget submitted be funded, these projects would include a new University Connector crosstown route originating near TSU, coming across the new 28th 31st Avenue Connector, Avenue Bridge, and crossing several of our bus routes while connecting TSU with Vanderbilt, Belmont, and other points east and south. We would establish a second bus rapid transit light service, BRT Light for short, along our second most heavily used bus route, Murfreesboro Road, which travels through the heart of Antioch. This upgrade will be modeled after our highly successful Gallatin Road BRT Light service, which has seen its monthly ridership increases from 80,000 trips per month to almost 120,000 trips last month. And finally, but importantly, our budget submittal will allow us to continue to meet the expanding needs of our Access Ride program for persons with disabilities as we continue our policy of not turning down requests from our 12,000 plus certified users of this service in Davidson County. A very exciting project which is now moving through the planning process is what we are calling the East-West Connector. This East-West Connector would operate on exclusive lanes, which means it will not get stuck in traffic, along the busy 8-mile corridor that stretches from 5 Points in East Nashville to White Bridge Road in West Nashville. We have completed phase 1 of our studies, with full BRT being selected as the preferred transportation mode to be pursued for federal funding. Our initial thought process considered a streetcar for this corridor. However, once the initial alternatives analysis was completed earlier this year, it was determined that essentially the same number of people, passengers, would ride the BRT at half the capital investment that a streetcar would require. The MTA board recently awarded a phase 2 contract for the preliminary engineering and environmental assessment phases of the project. We'll keep you posted as this project moves forward into the development stages. In closing, I'm pleased to report that we are on budget for this fiscal year, and we thank you for this council's support of the current budget. We earnestly ask for your support of the mayor's recommended fiscal year 2013 budget for MTA before you tonight, which will allow us to continue to serve our residents and visitors with the quality of public transit service we all want to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councilman Stein, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ballard. So the Gallatin Road BRT has already shown an increase of, over 50% ridership?
Yes, sir.
What you may or may not have these numbers, but in the Murfreesboro Road corridor, which is obviously the big ticket item in this budget, do you have any feel for how many folks you're transporting now? And I assume that we could expect the same kinds of increases once we have BRT. How many folks does that route impact?
Councilman, I just happen to have those numbers with me.
I'm shocked.
Murfreesboro Road is currently carrying about 70,000 passengers per month, and based on our experience with the Gallatin Road success, we believe that we can easily reach the 100,000 passengers per month mark on Murfreesboro Road.
The news about the Whites Creek, Hunter's Lane is obviously great news. That comes from a federal grant?
Yes, that's correct.
And when would that be up and running?
We'll be able to start that this fall.
Okay. And then finally, it is budget related because your collaboration with the public school system, transportation system now, and the work that you all are doing together around transportation for young people in particular is a model for the rest of the country, and eventually I think will make a substantial difference for young people in this community who are having trouble getting to jobs, to programs, to appropriate recreation, and I commend you for that work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Tigard, you're recognized.
Thank you, and thank you, Paul. Impact of oil prices on gas, diesel fuel, and what you foresee for the future.
Well, we're very fortunate in that we have partnered with Metro in the fuel hedge program. And so we are fuel hedge protected for 82% of our fuel. Is that the right number? It is approximately 72%. Excuse me, 72%. And that has really helped us significantly. If you remember 2008, we had been buying on the spot market, and we were significantly impacted. But the fuel hedge program has saved Metro and the participating governments over $6.5 million in the 2.5 years that we've been participating in that. So we anticipate fuel, of course, to go up eventually, but we're largely protected from those increases. And we set our prices at 12-month intervals.
Great. discuss what percent of your budget on advertising, especially concentrating on any outreach programs to large businesses along the major corridors. You know, I would love to be able to ride the bus, but where my business is located would require so many zigzags to get there. So, I mean, the Vanderbilts of the world that are right on the major thoroughfare just seem to be such natural targets. What can you do to attract more participation like you have with the college communities, you know, providing rides for their employees and encouragement and this type of thing?
Yes, sir. Well, actually, the program, we call that our Easy Ride program, and this is where we have employers support their employees by paying for their transportation. And we actually do have the ability to adjust our bus routes to support those employers who want to do that. As an example, when Asurion opened a new call center in Grassmere Park, we adjusted our number 12 Nolensville bus route so that it stops at the front door. They signed up for the program, and we have several hundred employees based there, a large number of which are actually using the buses now. That then led further. Now that they're going to the Raglan building downtown, we're also talking to them about adding those employees to the program. So we do have the ability to adjust our routes with planning to serve these major passenger generators as they come to town. That's really been the single most successful effort to attract new riders, has been the Easy Ride program with employers.
And then finally, is there a charge for Access Ride?
Yes. The Access Ride charge is 2 times the base fare. So right now the base fare is $1.70, so it's $3.40.
Is there a charge if a client makes an appointment and stands you up? And I say that because I had a disabled client who canceled a tax appointment late, but then the pickup ride from my office still arrived, and that just seemed to be, you know, I suspect, knowing this particular client, that it was a failure on their part to cancel the pickup and not a failure on your system. But was the client penalized for an action like that, or is that something that you just eat?
I would like to say that we do penalize our clients, but many of our clients generally don't have the ability to pay that, so we probably did not.
Thank you.
You, Councilman. Councilman Holloman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Appreciate you being here today. A couple of questions. One, you said that 25% of your budget is generated from fees. Can you compare that with other similar size bus services around the country? I mean, are we ahead of the curve, behind the curve on how much we pay for with fees from riders?
That's pretty comparable. 25% is generally what most medium-sized and smaller medium-sized cities strive for.
Okay. And I know it's not immediately part of this budget, but with Gallatin Road, BRT expanding, as Councilman Stein said, ridership up, moving to Murfreesboro Road, and the plan in the works to fund the East-West connector that'll come from East Nashville through West End. Can you talk a little bit about, I know we're seeking the $68 million in funds from the federal government. Can you talk about the local match that would be required for that, funding strategies to pay for that, and I guess where you see that going? Because obviously I think we have what's in front of us here today, but if we want to be serious about having meaningful BRT system, those all have to link together. And so I think it's good for us to get a window into what we're looking at in the next 2 to 5 years in terms of BRT.
Certainly. Well, I will use as the example the Music City Central Station, which we opened in October of 2008. We, over 3 or 4 years, put together 16 different funding sources. Some were federal, some were state, some were local. And the final piece was a long-term lease of some parking spaces to the state of Tennessee. And so as we look at the Broadway West End corridor, what we're focusing on right now is identifying which federal funds we can attract. That's what we're working on first. I think that there's a potential for perhaps as much as $75 million in federal dollars for that project. Once we
For the East-West connector?
for the East-West, specifically for the East-West
Just for
connector.
that, okay.
Yes, and so I think once we're able to nail down what the federal portion will be, then we would talk to the state and see what portion we could get from the state. The state frequently participates in matching programs like that. And then I think once we have the federal and the state, then we would look at local. At this point in time, there's nothing in this year's budget that would apply to that. But I think that would be a conversation that this council would have as we hopefully present this successfully. If we don't get the federal funds,
Yeah, that was my next question, is what do we do? Do we just not pursue that BRT, or do we,
I think we back up
try to fund it with state and local dollars only?
that's something that we would discuss with you.
Okay.
But I think at this point, I mean, we are working very, very hard to attract the federal funds. We have an excellent track record. We have a grants department that is second to none in attracting federal dollars to Nashville. And they're working very, very hard on this. We have made trips to the Federal Transit Administration Regional Office in Atlanta. We have a trip scheduled to meet with officials in Washington of Federal Transit Administration. And we feel that we'll be successful. I mean, we're very optimistic.
Okay. And last question, I know that for a period of time you had the card swipes for the credit cards. I think you and I have talked about this before. I personally found it to be very convenient. I personally find the lack of them now to somewhat affect my use of the bus system, just simply because I don't always have cash with me. I know that there are security issues with that system. I just wondered, it's now been, I think, almost 2 years since you took them out. Can you talk about whether they may be coming back and you know, whether they're working successfully in other cities and what we would need to do in order to have that system come back here?
Right. We were very pleased when we were able to accept credit cards on the buses. But the problem with it was that it was a batch system when we would download all the information at night. And unfortunately, some folks discovered that they could steal a credit card from a store, not pay for it, and it would actually work. There's some progress being made, and we continue to work with GFI, our farebox company, to see what new credit card approaches can be taken. So we're studying them. We have not given up on that. A lot of our passengers really appreciated the ability. We think we got a lot of riders who just hopped on at the last minute. And
I mean, have you evaluated how much that security issue cost you versus what you think the impact would be from not having that service available? I mean, I know you don't ever want to lose money, but I almost wonder which way you're losing more money. Have you looked at that?
There was not a lot of money lost, but we did a graph on it, and the way it was growing, we had to stop it.
Okay.
But I'm convinced, I'm absolutely committed to going back to the credit cards once we can make sure that we can protect that revenue source.
Great. And I'm sorry, I do have one more question, which is just, we talked a little bit earlier with the codes department about smartphone apps. Are y'all looking at adding any type of smartphone app for, you know, bus tracking? I think you have GPS on the existing buses.
Yes, we do.
How far away are we from making that a reality to have that type of service? I know a lot of cities have it, so you get real-time locations of your buses and bus maps, routes, fares, fees, all of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, we were just awarded a federal grant to develop that iPhone-type application so that it'll be available on your PDAs. Right now, we track all of our buses on computer, but I'm hoping that maybe by the fall, late winter, or early winter, that we'll actually have that iPhone-type application available so that you can just bring it up. I mean, what you can do
And that's
now,
through a
of course-
federal grant? I'm sorry,
Yes.
is that what you said? Okay.
I mean, right now, we're on Google Maps, so if you've got Google on your PDA, it'll bring up the static schedules, and you can enter where you are, where you want to go, and it'll give you the next 3 times. And this is on Google. It's really fairly simple, but it's not real time. So
Right.
it's published schedule time. But we hope by the fall, early winter, to be real time. So it'll tell you, for example, if you go to Music City Central Station now, the digital readouts will say, if you're at Bay 7, it'll say your bus will be here in 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, because we are tracking them.
Right.
So the next step is absolutely something we're going to do. We'll do it this year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Hunt, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Paul, glad to see you here today. Let me first say I appreciate the Whites Creek High School bus route that you're going to implement this fall, even though my good friend Charlie Tiger said it wasn't going to happen, but I guess you showed him. But Let me ask you this, because I've been interested in how do your bus routes start? Is it bus to people or people to buses? In other words, do you send a bus out to see how many people are going to ride that system? Or do you wait till people say, we need the bus, and if you get a certain amount of people, you take a look at it? Which one do you do?
Well, it's actually a combination of what you have mentioned, and then we take it one step further. We have a program called BusLink, and we take a geographic area, and I'll use Madison as an example. We pick a geographic area, and we set up bus stops, and we put a smaller bus in that area, and then it's on call. So you pick up your phone, you call the number, and the bus will come and pick you up in your neighborhood and take you to a bus route or to a shopping center or whatever. And what we do is we do that for about a year, and then we maintain all the data. We find out exactly where people are traveling to and from, exactly what time, and then we design a bus route around that. And that's really a really excellent way to do this, because we're providing transportation while we're doing the market research. And then it's a combination of, we receive a lot of comments and suggestions. We also have a master plan that guides our development of bus routes, and that's on the MTA website. We have regular public hearings where we get input from passengers and prospective passengers. So it's really a combination of all of those things. It's more an art than a science, but what we do is we measure all of our routes based on performance. The 4 key indicators that we look at are passengers per mile, passengers per hour, revenue per mile, and revenue per hour. And that comes up with a factor, and then we stack all the services against each other. And so we know what's doing well and what we need to focus on changing.
I'm going to be brief, Mr. Chairman, because I know we're behind time. But the reason I asked you that question, because I don't know if you know, maybe we need to come out there one morning. When you come out there in the morning time between 7 o'clock, you have a ton of cars running down Clarksville Highway, Brick Church Pike, and they actually go that route because the I-24 is always clogged up. And I noticed, because I live off of Brick Church Pike, and I noticed that you can't hardly pull out there because of the traffic. And that thing run all the way up to the county line, Union Hill, and all up straight downtown without even making a turn hardly. And I was wondering, were you aware of that?
Sounds like a really good opportunity for bus service. We'll be talking.
You need to see that, but thank you again
sir.
about that. But and also, the reason I said this, because this improves the route on that northwest corner. You got Madison and you got Gallatin Road, but all around that northwest corridor, it's absence of buses. But I see all those people in the cars making a beeline in the morning and in the afternoon. And it really needs to be taken a look at. One final thing, and I'm going to let you go. I noticed on your budget changes and impact highlights, you had something like over $1 million in increased fuel and parts expense. Have you ever thought about running any of those vehicles on natural gas?
Yes, actually we have. We're constantly looking at alternatives. The board and I have largely focused on hybrid technology because we are, in fact, getting significantly better fuel mileage. To go to natural gas would require a significant modification of all of our maintenance facilities to service those. We're real pleased with the hybrid technology, and we're also looking at electric buses, and ultimately I'd love to see fuel cell technology be adopted. It's not ready yet. There are some buses in service, but it's still out of reach financially.
Right, so you hadn't had a really good chance to look at what the savings might be going to an alternative source
Well,
other than
we
gasoline?
do consider hybrid to be an alternative because it's about a 35% reduction in fuel mileage by doing that, electric hybrids.
But you've not really looked at the natural gas scene yet, is that right?
We've looked at the costs, and the capital costs to make those conversions would be staggering.
Is that right? Okay, I appreciate the job you're doing. I just want to get those
Thanks, sir.
answers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Council Lady Berry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm over here, so thanks. Thank you, Mr. Ballard, for coming down today. I have a quick question for you. You very kindly provided with us 3 different levels of funding based on the subsidy that you would get. There is also the 4th option that folks are floating out there among conversation. That is a 0 subsidy. Can you talk about what the impact of a 0 subsidy would do to you?
Well, no one's having that conversation with me yet, so. We would obviously not be very supportive of that. And it just so happens I made a few notes that would address that issue because I have heard that conversation is being held. But we would become the only city of any size in the United States which does not provide or attempt to provide a balanced approach to transportation, which is roads, transportation, transit, bicycles, and sidewalks. The 11 million projected transit passenger trips for fiscal year 2013 would instead be taken by automobile for those who have that option. Traffic congestion in Nashville would be immediate. Unemployment for transit users would increase. 52% of those 11 million trips are taken by people going to and from work. Businesses would lose employees as they are unable to get to work. The chamber and other entities trying to attract businesses to locate here would really have a tough job. Air quality reductions as a result of eliminating public transit could restrict the ability of businesses to build in Nashville, and further road improvements could also be restricted as a result. The 12,000 Davidson County registered users of Access Ride, our service for persons with disabilities, that would end. And most of those individuals would simply be confined to their homes without the ability to workshop, receive medical treatment, or interact with families and friends. And we're projecting 400,000 Access Ride trips for next year. Almost 3,000 school students use MTA services to get to and from school. Metro Nashville Public Schools would be forced to put these children in cabs or significantly expand the yellow school bus fleet. The 40-plus high school academies really couldn't function without a functioning public transit system. The youth in Nashville would lose its mobility. We would cease to exist, along with 524 jobs, 79% of which are filled by minority employees. Private sector jobs would also disappear here in Nashville from all of the private businesses that support MTA and RTA. The Regional Transportation Authority, which we manage under contract, would also cease to exist, and all the current bus and train passengers commuting from the 6 surrounding counties would be back in their cars on the interstate highways coming to and from Nashville. And last but not least is tens of millions of dollars would be demanded back by the federal government for their significant investment in MTA and RTA capital programs, which include Music City Central Station, Music City Star, Gallatin Road BRT, Madison office and maintenance facilities, and the Nestor Street bus garage. An early estimate is that could easily reach $100 million. So there are significant reasons for not giving that a lot of credence.
Thank you. I think that you can sum it up that it would be very impactful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. Council Lady Dow, you are recognized.
Thank you. I'll just ask one question for the sake of time. My question is on the bus link that we run out in the communities. We have one, of course, out in Antioch. Is there, I know I heard you mention that with Walter Hunt answering his question that the bus links is what is used to determine new routes. We've noticed out in our area specifically that the bus link is very rarely utilized. Is there any way you can provide me some information on ridership? And then second, would that bus link model be better utilized if it was like instead of riding around on those stops, because there are a number of stops that it stops on, and then the driver, if there's no one calling, they're usually sitting idle out in the district. Is there any opportunity to have some type of dispatch type service for that, where if a person wants to utilize one of the bus link, it goes, you know, they call, they go pick them up, versus driving that route over and over again with nobody on it?
Well, actually, the way it works is it's not supposed to be driving around unless someone has called the bus to pick them up. So the bus stops that are established are where if you call in, you walk out to that bus stop and the bus comes and gets you. So the bus is really not moving around unless someone has It's not supposed to be moving around unless someone has actually called it. The ridership on the bus link in Antioch, we feel 2.4 passengers per hour is a reasonable passenger count for that. It's just barely at 2.5 right now, so it hasn't achieved the level of success that the one in Madison achieved, and we pretty quickly converted it. I think what we're looking at now is perhaps moving that geographic area a little bit, perhaps a little further south, to take more of the area of the Walmart in. So we're looking at restructuring that area a little bit. It's successful from our standards, but we would like to do better. But I can provide you any ridership information you'd like to have.
Okay, and just one last thing I would
Yes,
mention
ma'am.
is that I noticed that when we're looking at mass transit, we're looking at purchasing larger buses, and I was wondering, have we ever considered going to a European model where they use smaller buses that allow for more frequent trips versus using the double buses that you see a lot with not as many people on it as a way of saving money and increasing ridership?
Well, we're actually doing both. We're buying the larger buses and we're increasing frequency. The largest cost component in operating public transit is in labor. It's the cost of the operator of the bus. That's as much as 70 to 75% of our total cost. So the way we achieve efficiency is to have more passengers per driver. So that's why we do buy the larger buses, and we have situations today where we're having to put 2 smaller buses out on a route because we don't have enough of the bigger buses. So the answer is that it's a combination of equipment. For the heavy corridors, Gallatin, Murfreesboro Road, and those types, it really does call for the large buses. And then on the smaller neighborhood routes, we do use smaller buses. We have 35-foot transit buses that we use on those smaller routes. The basic bus is a 40-foot bus, and then that hybrid articulated coach is 60 feet. So we try to match the size of the bus with the numbers of passengers that are using the bus.
Thank you, that was it.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see, Council Lady Gilmore, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ballard. I wanted to know how the citizens in the north and south area of town can take advantage of the planned east-west connector.
Well, it will be part of a complete system that the entire city is plugged into. I mean, that will connect with every single bus route at Music City Central and other points. For example, one of the new bus routes that we anticipate establishing in the fall will be this University Connector, which starts at TSU and comes across the new 28th and 31st Avenue connector, and that would connect with the BRT at 31st and West End. And so there are many, many opportunities for other bus routes that will be connecting with the BRT. So it'll make for faster trips. One of the comments that we get from folks is that I'd really like to get where I'm going without having to go downtown. And the BRT will cross so many of these routes, and so many additional routes will cross it, that it will give more opportunities for people to not have to come downtown.
Okay. And I was going to say, too, I think it would be, I guess, I don't know which one comes first, the chicken or the egg, but to increase the ridership, it's my understanding in areas maybe of, I heard you say that I think for Madison areas like 80,000 ridership. Did you say something like that?
That was on the Gallatin Road bus route prior to establishment of the Bus Rapid Transit Light. It was about 80,000 trips a month.
Okay, just to try to increase it, I guess, in the north and south area, especially since those areas have high unemployment, and it's not, I guess, sometimes easy as it should be. And I don't know if it's because, sometimes people say we're not on a grid system. I don't know what it is, but it's not as easy to catch the bus as it should be. And I don't know if we could look at ways to increase that, even though it may be difficult, so persons that really need it can take advantage of that.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the comment.
Well, Nashville is not a grid city. There are some great transit grid cities in this country. Phoenix is one where the streets are laid out on a grid, and so you have really, really very, very frequent transfer. We're a hub and spoke city. We have a crosstown route that's called the Midtown Joe Johnson and Hart Street. It's a very popular route. It connects a lot of routes. The new University Connector will connect a lot. But this is a hub and spoke city, and that's the way our roads are structured.
And I wanted to ask you, too, is TSU, Fisk, and Meharry, are they part of your easy commuter program?
We're working on them.
Okay, so you are working on them. Okay, that's good. And I would just like, I guess, once again, to put forth a charge that we encourage ridership and look for ways to increase it, because I think it's very important for those areas that may not be as savvy. I don't know what the answer is. I know the ridership is not as high, but it's really a need in the community, especially in areas where there's high unemployment, and you talk about the opportunity to increase that.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we will pass the 10 million passenger mark this year for the first time in modern times on MTA, so MTA and RTA. So more and more people are discovering transit, and gasoline prices help too.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Council Eddie. We are about 25 minutes behind schedule at this point, and several members in my queue. If you do have a question that could be asked over email or in a separate conversation, I would ask that you drop out of the queue, please. Councilman Bednay, you are recognized.
I thought you forgot me. I had a question about shelters. We need more shelters on the southeast. I was wondering if you could offset the cost and bring in some shelters in needed places by using advertisement?
Yes, sir. Two parts to my answer on that. One, we have over 4,000 bus stops in Davidson County, and we have a program where we buy and install shelters, and I think we're up to about 800 shelters around the city. We actually have a program where we evaluate the numbers of passengers who use the stops, and we try to assign those shelters to the stops that have the heaviest use. But we're always willing to have input from the community if there are specific needs, and we'd be more than happy to receive any suggestions that you might have for those additional shelters.
Yeah, any shelter on the southeast will be welcome.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Then
sir.
the other question is, how about, I'm from Buenos Aires and in Argentina, and there is a private and public partnership where you can actually, for example, the bus system is private, but the subway is owned by the city, so you can get a ticket, get on a bus, and then go to a subway stop and finish your ride on the subway. Have you explored opening your system to private-public partnerships where you could have some private entities cover some areas, like in the southeast, for example? You may not need to go all the way downtown to come back and go to another place. So is that something that the MTA had explored?
Well, we actually do have a partnership with a private carrier. Gray Line of Tennessee operates most of the regional services in and out of Music City Central. They operate all the services to Sumner County, Williamson County, Robertson County, and then we have another private contractor that operates the Music City Star. So we actually do have that public-private partnership going in that respect. So yes, we have looked at it, and we do that with those services.
I'm talking about smaller scale routes, not big scale. I mean, local stuff. Like she was talking about smaller size buses that could cover smaller areas in the city, and based on need. I know you have that link that you were describing before.
Yes, sir.
But couldn't that be done by a private entity or an entrepreneur that buys into that franchise and then it connects with the MTA system?
I think that there may be some possibilities. One of the issues that we do have is that for the services that have been traditionally operated by the Metropolitan Transit Authority, we are required by the federal government to continue to allow the labor union that operates that service to continue to do that. That is a condition of the federal funds that we receive. So it's not burdensome. We have the best employees. I don't think any company could come in with better employees than we have operating those services right now. We do operate efficiently, and but we do use the private sector every opportunity that we can, primarily for new services, expanding services.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Claiborne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Ballard, thank you for being here. I have one series of questions, but before I ask you the question, I'd like to ask Mr. Riebling a question. If the budget as we have it were to be passed, what would be the net gain of employees to metro departments?
I don't know that, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'll get it for you. You talk
mean,
about all departments, the whole, throughout the government.
Across the board. I mean, like we're funding a couple of positions in,
I understand,
like,
yeah. But you just
that
talk
kind
about
of-
total all across the government.
Across the board, yeah.
We can get that for you. I don't have it for you tonight, but I can get it for you.
I mean, would you say it's 50, more than 50, less than 50, 100?
I think it's that's part-time, there's no employees there, no employees there, no employees there. Cops are no new employees. I'm guessing 50.
50 or less. Okay, thank you.
Hold on, John's doing a little check for me. You think that's about right, John? I'm on my toes now, so.
Yeah, it's less than 50.
It's probably less than 50, I would say. Now, I'm not sure if that doesn't include MTA. I'm not sure. Their numbers seem to be a little different, yeah.
Okay.
That would be a different, but in terms of the general government,
Right.
Not counting schools, because schools has a number of new teachers, so that would not be
Right.
that number. But in the general government, I'd say less than 50. Schools is probably 100 or so, most of which are new teachers to take care of enrollment growth. And then I'm not sure about MTA. I think
Right.
your
But
report
in-
says 70 new employees or something. I think so.
But in metro departments?
It's probably less than
Okay.
50.
So there's my question. I'm noticing in your scenario budget level number 1 that you are asking for 71 more employees. And if my math is right, that's like a 13.5% increase. Is that?
Yes, sir. That's for all of the new services that we're proposing to operate. If the budget is not funded, then we will not hire these bus drivers and mechanics.
Okay, so these are bus drivers and mechanics. So are these, that figures out to an average of, I think, 71 into 3.3 million is $46,478. Are those union-driven salaries?
I'll ask my CFO to handle that one.
If you would ask the question one more time.
I said 71 new employees,
Right.
a 3.3 million subsidy to achieve that. That's 46,478 and cents average. Are those union-driven salaries?
Yes, the answer to that is yes, but you've also got to take into account the federal funding that goes along with that. The subsidy request increase is the 3.3 million, but we also have another $2 million of federal funding that is also covering part of that labor cost. Does that make sense?
Okay, so that's over $5 million for 71 employees.
I'm sorry, yes, the 3.3 subsidy is not just labor costs.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Well, how much of that would be labor, do you know?
Yes, sir. That would be, the labor cost is approximately $2.1 million.
2.1. Okay, so the remaining part is equipment or?
Fuel cost increase is almost $1 million by itself. You've got an increase of health insurance and workers' comp is approximately $1.1 million. You've got pension costs at approximately a little over $500,000. You have other services in relation to support for our access ride services in terms of the fact that we don't turn down a ride and we have taxi support services. That plus the liability insurance on, again, the additional buses that will be required for the new services, that's almost another $1 million. If you would look at, I believe it is page J49 in the budget book, that pretty much lays out a lot of the things that I was just discussing.
Right. Okay. I'm just, when I look at what you're asking to increase the number of positions that you're asking, and I look at what the increase for the metro departments increase is requiring, that's just a bold request in my estimation.
And I guess it falls back on something Mr. Ballard said earlier. You have to realize in transit, about 75% of the cost is labor related. So when you add the new services, for which we have a lot of federal funding to support it as well for the next 3 years, you're going to see a pretty big increase as far as the number of drivers and mechanics it's going to take to support that new service.
Okay, so you're showing that in level number 2, if the subsidy stays as it is, that you're going to lose 34 employees. Is that right?
Correct. And that, again, goes to the fact that regardless of the fact that we don't have a subsidy increase, we still have $1 million increase in fuel costs. We still have increase in pension costs that have to be covered somehow, and the only way to do that would be to cut the service affecting labor, again, which is the biggest piece of our budget.
So what is the amount needed to sustain you at the current level?
To sustain at the current level, I would have to get that information. We did not put that together. Basically, you're looking at, without the new service, if you didn't have the new service, it's still going to be somewhere between the $0 and $3.3 million that we're asking for, because again, there's expenses that are having to be covered.
Obviously, that's true, but you know, I would think in budget scenario that you would have provided a budget scenario level that would have been a maintenance level.
And we can certainly do that.
Would that be an unusual expectation?
No, we have done that in the past, but we can certainly supply that to you.
I think that would be good to do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We are 35 minutes behind schedule. I'd just like to remind the committee of that. Councilman Dominy, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and I will point out this is our only chance to deal with the budget issues.
Understood. Just wanted to remind.
Mr. Ballard, I appreciate you being here. We had discussed briefly a way to connect. You had pointed out earlier that we have a spoke system. That's just part of the way our city was created. But one of the shortcomings that residents have brought up to me over and over again is the lack of connection between those spokes. One of the issues coming up here pretty soon in southeast Davidson County is the opening of Nashville State Tech at Hickory Hollow Mall. What would the budgetary cost be to create a de facto connection between, say, the Nolensville Road spoke and the Murfreesboro Road spoke, with the location being at Hickory Hollow? And could that be implemented across the city and other locations, and what would be the process to do that, and how would that impact your budget?
Right. Well, after we had that conversation, I've discussed that with our planning department, and we're factoring that into, we'll be updating our master plan, and we think that that's something we'd like to do. I don't have a number for you, but it's the type of thing that we definitely want to do based on the ridership. But I don't have a number that I could give you tonight. I could certainly provide that to you.
If you would do that, I would appreciate that, because that is something that, in that instance, would create a connectivity between those spokes. And there may be other locations across the city that could be done, and it would be possibly a less budgetary impact to do that rather than have additional routes, because you're dealing with the same employees. You're just redirecting those routes so that they connect at a central point between the spokes, and by default creating a connectivity between those spokes out in the outer ring of the county. So I would appreciate if you could provide me with that.
Yes, sir.
And I will go on to the next member. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Council Lady Johnson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair McGuire. Thank you, Mr. Ballard. I first want to say, on behalf of the people in my district, that we are very excited about your decision to expand the BRT Light along Murfreesboro Road. I really appreciate Mr. Byer and Mr. McAteer meeting with what we call the MTA Riders Group. In District 29, I have a significant number of people, as you know, from the petition that was submitted to you all, as well as all of the ideas and recommendations that came from that group of people. I also have been riding the bus with them quite a bit, just to learn about why they're having some of these concerns and that they expressed to you. One of the things that one of the leaders of the group expressed and wanted me to share with you this evening is that there are still few changes thus far around the bus for 38X being full at the Music City Central. She says that there's usually only one seat left, And usually people have to give up their seat or stand most of the way. She also said there are times when special activities and events are going on for the high school students who attend the schools downtown, and there are even more people and riders of which there are no seats. We really need a larger bus for this route at the 445 run. And kind of piggybacking on what others have said about extending the spokes, the bus link service is great, but like this lady has expressed to me repeatedly with this group, she doesn't have a car. The bus is only running Monday through Friday at certain times. She says we need the bus link service to extend beyond where the Compton store is located at Smith Springs and Anderson Road, as well as providing weekend service. And these people are willing to pay for the pickup service in that manner. So these were some of the things that still were lingering from our meeting that we had with Mr. Byer, Mr. McAteer, and some of your other staff. The other situation is, when I looked at your budget, you had expressed that some of your strategic issues where you were going to be having to add more bus operators. Those additional positions, I assume, are coming from the extension of services with
Yes.
this area.
Yes, ma'am.
Are many of those positions funded through grant funds?
It's a combination of federal, state, and local. So yes, some of them are grant funded.
But
Yes,
the
ma'am.
majority of it would be probably from the grant funding. Am I correct?
The funding is we apply for funds by route, and the BRT expansion to Murfreesboro Road would be local funds in that particular case.
Okay,
Those are
okay.
local funds.
Thank you.
You got to have a scorecard to keep track of where you're paying for each service. It gets a little complicated, but that.
Well, my area is very excited about
ma'am.
you all and the services you're providing. We're literally needing more. So thank you.
Well, I've made a note of the specifics, and I'll follow up on them.
Thank you, Council Lady. Council Lady Blaylock, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get a list of all that you read off, and if you did not get a subsidy. Could you provide that to us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. I have no other members in my queue, so Mr. Ballard, we appreciate it very much. Mr. Oliphant, Mr. Yarborough, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.